Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. This is episode number 431, and I'm your host, Andrew Schultz. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about supplying AC filters for your rentals, who to call for references when screening new tenants, and tips for maximizing your central air during the summer heat. We'll get to all that right after this.
Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. Now your host, Andrew Schultz.
The Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group is over 14,000 members. Our group members get access to our Sherwin-Williams and PPG paint discount programs, can ask questions in our monthly AMA sessions, and much more. So if you have a question or a situation that you've never encountered before, or you just need to bounce an idea off a huge group of housing providers, this is the place. If you haven't checked it out yet, do it today over at facebook.com/groups/rentprep. Don't forget to mention the podcast when answering the questions so we know how you found us.
Water cooler wisdom. Expert advice from real estate pros.
All right, we're going to get things started today with our water cooler wisdom segment. All of our segments this week actually come to us via the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. Don't forget to check that out if you're not already a member. Let's go ahead and jump right in here. Do you all supply the AC filters in your rentals? How do you ensure that they're being changed out? The poster actually provided a photo of a very, very nasty filter that they had to swap out for their tenant. This is the condition that my AC guy found the current vent in. The tenant said that he just threw it out yesterday and that their cleaning lady cleans the vent. I sure can't tell. And again, this one comes to us via the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. There are a few different stances that you can take on this. Some property owners do absolutely zero preventative maintenance on their HVAC systems. Some will service them once a year, and some will service them multiple times a year and change filters on a regular basis. Personally, I think that never servicing the HVAC carries some risk with it. The main risk is likely that of accelerated deterioration of the HVAC unit itself. If you never clean it, it's not going to last as long or work as well as a unit that's regularly cleaned and maintained. And beyond that risk, a broken HVAC unit can still run and can absolutely kill your tenant if you find out that it's malfunctioning. We send an HVAC technician out once a year to service all of our HVAC systems, typically just the heat, as the bulk of our homes did not have central air conditioning. But in the homes that do have central air conditioning, we service the HVAC systems at least twice per year. This involves going through the furnace, cleaning it, checking to ensure that it's operating correctly, ensuring the flame sensors and the thermocouples are working as they should, and most critically, checking the heat exchanger for cracks. A cracked heat exchanger can dump carbon monoxide into the air that's being pushed out through the ducts and into the home. Obviously, this is a bad thing. No one wants to find out that someone died because of a cracked heat exchanger. And believe it or not, this is not an altogether uncommon occurrence. When doing our preheating season services for the past 2 years, our HVAC technician found a cracked heat exchanger that could have seriously injured or killed one of our tenants. Fortunately, these were found before we got into heating season, so we were able to swap those furnaces without it becoming a much larger issue. And this brings me to my next point. When we service the HVAC, we also conduct our smoke and CO detector checks at the same time. We place smoke detectors inside every bedroom, as well as a smoke and a CO detector within 10 feet of the outside of the bedroom doors. Every smoke and CO detector is checked to ensure that it's working as it should. And if it isn't a 10-year sealed battery unit, we swap the batteries out at the same time. If there are any units that are missing, we go ahead and replace them at the same time. And we also bill the tenant for those, as we typically have photos of those units being installed at the time of move-in. I personally prefer separate smoke and CO detector units in the properties that we manage. CO is slightly lighter than air, which means that in theory, it should rise above air and be detected at or near the ceiling level. But more realistically, CO often mixes with the room air. So depending on where your vents are, either floor or ceiling, you may want to alter your placement of the CO detector to either lower or higher on the wall. We typically mount a couple feet up from the floor when we have floor vents and a couple feet down from the ceiling when we have ceiling vents. And as always, they come with a manual which will specify what the manufacturer recommends. At a minimum, you should have at least one CO and one smoke detector per level of the home, and code often dictates that more than that are required. Now, jumping back to filters, there are some that prefer to change out the filter every month, and depending on your environment, that could be necessary or that may be overkill. If you're in a dusty environment or you have really bad airborne allergies, monthly changes may be warranted. At home, I typically change the filter in monthly in theory, but realistically and more accurately, it's probably closer to every 2 months that I remember that the filter needs to be swapped out. And then we service our unit twice a year, the HVAC and the central air at least twice a year. There are also some companies out there now that will ship the correct size filter to the home directly at an interval that you specify. So if you want them changed monthly, for instance, you can have them sent monthly and ask the tenant to handle swapping the filters out. Usually, if you're going to have a tenant handle it, it's a good idea to have them send a before and after photo so that you can see that the filter was actually swapped out. Some property managers will build filter delivery into a resident benefits package, but that's another topic for another day. Moving right along, we're going to jump into our second water cooler